Welcome to Tapped In with Tony. I'm your host, Tony Bogan, and tonight joining me is a fantasy football guru, a Marine vet, Kyle Lindemann, aka Luck is Made. Welcome to the program, man.
What's up, buddy? Been a minute, huh?
Yes, it has, especially from our days at Kent State.
This is true. This is true
Yep.
for sure.
So, how did you get involved in fantasy football? Tell us about your story. How did you get involved?
I think I was just home during COVID, man. I'd like finished up my master's program and my wife was pregnant at the time. And it was like, I just had all this free time. And like, it was a tough pregnancy for her. And like, she was going to bed by like 8 o'clock. And it was like, I would stay up for a few hours and I was like, man, like I need a hobby. And it was February. It was like right after the Super Bowl, like 2 years ago, and like the weather's not great, not really much we can do outside. Like, I'm sorry, yeah, 2 years ago. So COVID was kind of winding down, and like my wife was pregnant, and so really couldn't go out and do much because I didn't want her to, catch anything. So I stumbled across this post on Twitter, and this guy for this company called Roto Baller, they're like, yeah, we're looking for writers. And I sent him a DM. I was like, well, I don't, I'm like, I have some writing experience, but not sports writing. But I've been watching sports my whole life. I can, write up in a few things. So they had me write up like a piece article on the fly, and I sent it in, and then they read it and they liked it. And then I went through like two interviews, and I got through, and then I just started writing. I just got my hands on everything I could. I had to do a lot of like the dirty grunge work and doing waiver articles and some of the stuff no one really wanted to do, but just kind of worked my way up from there and proved myself. And now they kind of give me free reign. I guess kind of, I'm kind of able to write about whatever I want. So
Speaking of writing, you've been covering a lot of stuff, and as it pertains to this recent draft, what
yeah.
stood out to you about this draft? What were some surprises that stood out in general?
Well, I mean, the Michael Penix pick just stunned me. And the thing is, I really like Michael Penix. He was a guy that I like really kind of fell in love with during the process, and just learning more about him and his background, like all the adversity he'd overcome. It's like, man, this guy's battle tested. Like he doesn't get rattled, and man, he can just spin it. Like he has one of the best live arms I've ever seen. And I'm actually left-handed too, so it was like I kind of felt that bond with him, right? I was just surprised because you just paid Kirk Cousins like 5 or 6 weeks ago, and like people were coming at me. They're trying to compare it to the Jordan Love thing with Rodgers. And I'm just like, it's not comparable. Like Jordan Love went 26th overall. Like we didn't know how much longer Rodgers was going to play. And, it was kind of understood when the Packers did it. Like they wanted a succession plan. But like Atlanta and some of the fans are like, oh, well, his knee. And I'm like, well, dude, like, did you not do medicals on this guy? Like, if you're worried about injury, like, why the hell did you give this guy $180 million, $100 million guaranteed? So
Exactly.
that just blew my mind. Like I get it. If they just would have said, "Hey, Penix is our guy, we're taking him at 8," and then not sign Cousins, and then used all that money to like beef up your defense, like this is a defense that was 32nd in pass rush win rate last year. Like they don't really have anybody that can get after the quarterback. Like you're telling me you couldn't have used like Dallas Turner or Laiatu Latu with the 8th pick, or traded back, got more picks, and then taken Penix in the 20s. I think I'd have been fine with that, or at least I would have understood it. So that was just frustrating, but it was just such a star-studded draft, man. Like we didn't see any trades in the top 9, and the only
Yeah.
trade that we saw was Minnesota flipping up from 11 to 10 to make sure they got McCarthy. Like it was, this year's top 10 was really like a top 5 in most years. Like we were lucky we had like 3 receivers who were all top 5 picks in the same draft.
Hmm.
So it was just crazy.
Yeah. And as a Saints fan, I think Atlanta with the right tools could be the team that it's the South's is theirs to lose. And we got
Right.
Spencer Rattler in the fifth round. That was surprising and not surprising at the same time. But we really
Right.
did need the offensive line help. And I'm really glad we got our guy out of Oregon State.
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about the Saints, huh?
Yes, I'm a Saints
It's
fan.
funny you said that because I actually was doing a Madden franchise with the Saints, like trying to get them out of their cap pickle.
Yeah, it's gonna be till next year. We're in a cap pickle for a while.
Yeah,
Yep.
so that's interesting.
And I know that you were on the show. You were on Big Play Reflog show with Gab
Yeah, I was on Big
Boys
Play.
and McNeil. How talk about
Yeah.
that?
So that was fun, man. It was so I've been friends with McNeil just from Twitter and like talking Brown stuff. And I reached out to him like a month ago. I was like, hey, you need anything on this draft class for the Browns? Like hit me up. Like I've been studying all these guys for like a year. Happy to give you whatever you need. And then he reached out on a Sunday night. He's like, hey man, can you come into the studio tomorrow? We need you. I was like, yeah, sure. Can you come in and talk about the Browns draft? And funny thing was, like one of my biggest influences in the football space is Dane Brugler, who's actually, I don't know where exactly he's from, but he's from like Warren, Youngstown area.
Mm.
And he was supposed to be on the show to talk Browns draft. And then he was sick or something and couldn't do it. So they asked me to fill in, which was like, pretty awesome. I'm like, man, I got some big shoes to fill. I'm trying to fill this guy's shoes who like knows everything there is to know. They reached out to me and I was like, they didn't really give me a show sheet because we were kind of pressed for time, and they brought me in and I was like, all right, what are we going to talk about? And I had like 5 minutes to prep, and that was that. But it was fun.
That's amazing, man. Just shows how far things have come since the Kent days.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I kind of wish I would have broke in earlier, but my thought is like, better late than never, right?
Same. And that's what I became a doing sports in high school, content creator for high school sports in the area. Broke in
Right,
around that same time. And
right.
speaking of that, one of the players that I covered, Michael Hall, was drafted by the Browns. What do you make of that signing?
Yeah, it was funny because that was actually the pick that I predicted when I was on the show. They're like, "Oh, what's your surprise pick for the Browns?" And I said Michael Hall. My thought with him is like, I think this guy could be a top 20 pick next year if he'd returned to school. He was kind of one of the only Buckeyes that didn't. I think after Michigan won the national title, the boosters got together and they're like, we lost 3 to Michigan. Like, we can't let this happen. We got to make sure all these guys stay in Columbus. So they came together and, they gave these guys a good bit of money to stay, which, I get it. Um, but with him, it just sounds like he wanted to go pro. Now Brugler had said that several teams had Hall off their boards because of personality, character concerns. So curious to know more about that because I didn't realize that was the case with him. Um, he's just, he's got a ton of upside. He can, rush the passer from the interior. Like those guys are hard to find. So, we'll see. This feels like such a pivotal year for the Browns, like with Watson and we finally got our first round picks back, and there's a lot of guys that are up for contract next year. So it's like we don't know who's going to be back, and so I mean, it's tough. Obviously, when you don't have a first round pick, right?
Oh yeah, and I got to see Michael Hall play a couple times up at Streetsboro. I'm not that far from there. He played on both sides of the ball, offense and defense.
Oh yeah, I
Probably
forgot
one of the
about that.
best athletes to come out of Streetsboro High
Yeah,
School. Yeah.
yeah, it's
And the
true.
next pick, yeah, speaking of Ohio State, Michigan, the next pick, Zach Zinter. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I liked him. I mean, my thought is like you can never have enough depth on the offensive line. Like those guys get so banged up. Like Batonio's 32. Him and Teller are both free agents in 2 years. I mean, we'll probably end up re-signing Teller because he's just so good, but I have a hard time seeing us paying top dollar to both guys, especially when Batonio will be 24. And it's like, I love Batonio. He's been an amazing Brown, but at the same time, you got to do the math. Like, it's hard to have 2 expensive guards and expensive quarterback and receiver and edge rusher. It's like, under the salary cap, you have to skimp somewhere. So I think maybe their thought was Zinter, like, hey, this guy could be a starting guard for us for 2 years. If he develops. I liked him. I think maybe he slid a little bit because he was injured, but I was fine with it. I mean, I feel like those Michigan offensive linemen were so well coached and playing under Harbaugh, and they just had a really good culture up there. I know I'm not supposed to say that as a Buckeye fan, but it's true.
Yeah, they really put in the work the past season. I mean, you don't go undefeated by just luck. It takes a lot of
Yeah,
talent and coaching, which is what Harbaugh well, you have to wonder if it'll translate to the professional level, like with what
For
Harbaugh did
sure.
at Michigan.
Yeah.
And the next pick was Jamari Thrash of Louisville. I know this was a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, it was a surprise because I just feel like Barry doesn't have a good track record with drafting wide receivers right now. So, knock on wood, I've still got some hope for Cedric Tillman, but obviously the Anthony Schwartz and David Bell picks kind of less than to be desired in the third round. It's a deep class. I mean, he's a fast player. So I don't necessarily, hate the pick. We're just trying to get bodies. Can he be a contributor on special teams? So I wouldn't say I was over the moon about it, but several other people out there, did say that they liked the pick. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I can get around to this.
He probably slot in as a fourth or fifth wide receiver because the Browns did bring in. You have Elijah Moore. You have Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he probably slide in around fourth or fifth if he does get regular playing time on
Right.
special teams.
Right.
Then you have a couple seventh rounders, and you have Nathaniel Watson, a linebacker at Mississippi State, in the sixth round.
So he's an interesting cat because he was suspended a couple of times. He's been disciplined a couple of times. He got, arrested for drag racing and the passenger of his car got injured. This guy had like an anger flare up in high school and he actually like punched the ground during a game and fractured his hand and he had to miss time. So he's got a ton of talent though, and he can actually rush the passer. So he was definitely a guy that, if there was no character concerns, he would have went higher. But I get it. We needed a linebacker. Maybe they're trying to roll the dice on this guy. Hey, maybe he will grow up and mature and he realizes what's at stake. So I get it. It was definitely a true boom or bust pick, but after losing Walker and Taki, they definitely need some more depth.
Absolutely, especially you've got a great D line there, especially anchored by Myles Garrett.
Right.
That line, and you have JOK as a linebacker. That will definitely complement to that. And then you've got another Louisville, or actually you've got a pick out of South Dakota, Miles Harden.
I don't know as much about him. That was the guy we got in round 7, right?
Yes.
So he was an FCS player, so he wasn't playing at the FBS level. Now, it sounds like he's more of a physical cornerback who doesn't shy away from contact. Looks like he loves to step up and kind of hit guys. So I don't know if he's going to play the slot, probably more of a slot guy. He's going to be a long shot to make the team. We got a good cornerback room, but hey, they want to just draft a couple of bodies to throw in there and roll the dice and see what you get. Always a chance, you're going to hit lightning in a bottle. So
yeah. And also, you never know. Maybe one of those cornerbacks gets injured or something like that. You don't hope for an injury, but maybe it'd probably be something that maybe he slots in that role, or it's a tryout for another team who may be needing a cornerback.
Right, for sure.
And then you've got another 7th round draft pick, Jawan Briggs of Cincinnati.
You
got two Ohio
right,
players.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, they did pretty well with Jerome Ford. He was a Cincinnati guy, so I get it.
Yeah.
It sounds like he was kind of a favorite of the front office. He was a guy the Browns interviewed a couple of times, so understandable why they liked him.
Okay. And what would you grade the Browns draft and why?
I would say C+.
Okay.
If Watson was playing at a high level, and I know he's been up and down, he's been hurt, which not always fair to him. But the success of our draft, and I always say this all the time when you're doing draft grades, you got to include the players that teams acquired for the picks that they sent before the draft.
True.
You can't just look at the Browns draft and be like, oh, they didn't have a first round pick. Their grade sucks. Well, better to say why don't they have a first round pick? And if you say why, well, they tried to upgrade the quarterback position. It hasn't worked out great so far, but maybe there's a chance it will. So I would say C+. I mean, they kind of went with a lot of boomer bust picks, but I get why they did it,
And what do you think of the Browns going into this year? Do you believe that this year's a make or break season for Deshaun Watson?
Very much so. Because look at the money that he's owed the next 3 years. Like he's only going to get more expensive. they've deferred some of his cap hit. So it's like, if Deshaun Watson is really good, then I think they'll probably extend his contract, restructure it, push the money out to kind of give us a little bit more relief. But if he's not, it's like, man, how much longer do you want to kick the can down the road with that? You know what I mean? We don't
Exactly.
want to end up. We don't want to end up like the Broncos with Russell Wilson, where we're eating all this money. And I get why the Broncos moved on, and why they're bringing in Bo Nix, but like they're not getting the full benefit of Bo Nix's rookie contract because they're paying $80 million to Russell Wilson, and so over the next 2 years they're going to have a lot of dead cap from both of those. So they'll have the benefit of Nix's rookie deal the last 2 years, and the fifth option if he makes it that far. But yeah, I mean, I just think if like Watson's not the guy, like you don't need to extend it any further, but maybe the Browns see it differently. I don't know.
Yeah, because last year's season, I think more or less was anchored by that defense because
Yeah,
technically, they started 5 different QBs if you want to even count Jeff Driscoll, who played in the last game.
right. It's true. It's so
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, and because given that the Browns have had a lot of, unfortunate luck with quarterbacks, Watson with
Mhm.
his injuries and suspension. Flacco came in,
Right.
but Flacco, this isn't 2012-13 Flacco you were getting.
Right.
Although he was a great surprise the way he played, you weren't getting
Right.
2013 Flacco. The man's almost 40 years old. He's not Tom Brady.
Yeah, for sure.
So, do you also follow other sports in addition to football?
Not really. I mean, I'm kind of getting into the NBA. I think it's like you look at the NFL, right? And the NFL prides itself on parity, but man, like the Chiefs just feel so unbeatable, and they've had a good draft, and they've done well. So that part's interesting. I feel like with the NBA, it's like so wide open. Like 6 or 7 teams could win it all this year. So that part's fun. But it's just hard. I just don't really have time because like when I'm not doing football stuff, I want to spend time with my kids, and I'm just busy. There's just a lot going on. So
Oh yeah, and football season truly never ends. And I know up
mhm.
here in Ohio, they got the 7-on-7. They could do 7-on-7s in the
Right,
spring now. So
right. Oh yeah.
how big is that development wise in your opinion?
I mean, I think that's why we're seeing like better receiving classes every year because the spread offense has integrated its way down to like the junior football level. Like when I was playing football growing up, like we passed the ball like twice a game. Like now you got these teams just throwing the ball over the yard at 12 years old. Like that never used to be the case. So, obviously with how much the game's changed, less of an emphasis on running back, you got 3 wide receiver sets. Obviously, your better athletes are going to gravitate towards receiver. You think about how much money those guys make, how much longer their careers are compared to running backs. So it's just the natural evolution of football, when you think about it.
Exactly, and especially when there have been teams that have paid out a lot of these contracts, like Zeke Elliott,
Mm-hmm.
those players get hurt, or Le'Veon Bell, who sits out a year and then he's not
Right.
the same. And then you have Todd Gurley, who retired before the age of 27.
Right.
And he had
Yeah, I mean, I think if Dave Gettleman hadn't been fired from the Giants, he probably would have made Saquon Barkley the highest paid running back in history. But before Barkley's contract was up, like Gettleman got shown the door, so he never got to do that.
Yep. And the running back is kind of like the fullback, kind of more there. You'll still have your great players like your Derrick Henrys, and
Mm-hmm.
like you'll have Gus Edwards as well. But it's very
Right.
risky because you'll get those yards if they're healthy, but if they're
Yeah.
not, you also sometimes you'll see quarterbacks also running the ball themselves. Like Patrick Mahomes
Right.
can sling it 4,000 yards a year, but he can also run the ball if need be.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. So what would you say about the quarterback changes, so to say, like when it's you go from like your gunslingers like your Peyton Mannings, your Drew Breeses to your dual threat guys like Lamar Jackson, or even before him, I'd say Michael
Yeah.
Vick.
Yeah, I mean, I think defenses have gotten better at like taking away what you do best. So we've seen an increase in like too high safety, soft shell coverage. It's actually gone up significantly in the last 3 years. It really started becoming prevalent. It's kind of a Vic Fangio thing, but Lou Anarumo of the Bengals used it a lot at the end of the 2021 season when, they beat the Chiefs in the regular season, then they beat them in the playoffs, ended up going to the Super Bowl. Everyone kind of copied that method as like a way to kind of slow the Chiefs down, right? Hey, we're going to take away the big play. You're not going to be able to throw it deep to Tyreek. We're going to make you beat us short over and over and over. And it works, especially against teams who rely on running the ball, because, okay, we'll give you 5 yards. We know that eventually you'll run for a loss or you're going to get a holding penalty, and that's pretty much the drive's over. So when you have defenses doing that and defenses become more evolved, better at shutting down what you do best, if you're a quarterback who can make plays with your legs, and not even necessarily to run, but at least to extend the play. Like if you watch Mahomes, you watch Josh Allen, they're not always really looking to run. They run to extend the play. They'll run when they have to. That's what makes Mahomes so deadly, is if it's 2nd and 7 and you leave that sideline open, like he'll run for 8 yards every time. So you can't do that because he'll beat you that way. But he's not looking to run. He's mostly he'll run behind the line of scrimmage to try to extend the play, wait for someone to get open. So I just think defenses have gotten better, and I think offensive tackle play has gone down. Like we're not seeing a true Orlando Pace. We're not seeing Joe Thomas. I mean, we have a lot of good tackles in the NFL, but we don't have someone that's like a true shutdown, like blindside blocker, like, even a Walter Jones, like when he was with the Seahawks. So the tackle play has gotten worse, and we've got these edge rushers that are just so fast off the edge. Your time to throw is 2.5, 3 seconds. If you don't get the ball out in that time, like a lot of times, like good things aren't going to happen. So I think, like the Manning, the Breedy, the Breeze, the Phillip Rivers, like those guys are gone. I kind of put Roethlisberger in that category, but like young Roethlisberger was so good at running around behind the line of scrimmage to extend the play, whereas those guys really didn't do that as much. So I think now with defenses being so good, like you've got to have some mobility as a quarterback, either to run or to extend the play, because the defenses are just so much better. Is that a good explanation?
That is a great explanation. And one guy that stood out to me that I wouldn't say he's really a runner, like CJ Stroud, but he's good. He threw for, I believe, 4,000 yards. Probably would have thrown for more if not for concussion issues later in the season. But that's a guy
Yeah.
who really broke out his rookie year.
Yeah.
And speaking of Pat Mahomes, do you think the Chiefs have a shot at three-peating, especially?
Oh, very much so. I love their draft. I mean, holy smokes. It's like they got Xavier Worthy, the fastest guy in the draft. And I know people said he's too similar to Hollywood Brown, but like Hollywood Brown only got signed for one more year,
Mhm.
So it's not like he's going to be there forever. They got Kingsley Suamatia, who's, potentially could fill in as their starter at left tackle. They kind of have a hole there. He's probably a little bit more of a project, but he's got a ton of potential. So, I mean, I get why, Kansas City made a couple of the picks they made. They also got Jaden Hicks, the safety from Washington State, who I really liked. So, I mean, and then they got another tight end, Jared Wiley from TCU, potential Kelsey replacement. So, Chiefs are always
Absolutely.
doing their thing, man. Andy Reid, Mahomes, like those guys are just going to be hard to beat together.
Exactly. I kind of see a parallels to Belichick and Brady. You may not have
Mm-hmm.
A or even B talent, but if you've got that coaching,
Right.
you don't need
Right.
that. Like the Chiefs were 10-7 last year, very pedestrian, and yet they
Right.
still won it all with McCole Hardman of
Yeah.
all players, who was with the
I
Jets earlier
know.
that year.
It's so funny. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. And my last question for you, before a couple more questions for you before we wrap up.
Yeah,
Who
sure.
has the best chance of knocking the Chiefs off to get to win the Super Bowl?
Ooh, that's a good question. The Bears? No, we're at least another year or two away from that. Man, that's a great question because I feel like the Ravens kind of took some steps back this year.
Mm.
Maybe the Texans because of the guys that they got, because like Stroud kind of seems like he's the guy that can go punch for punch with Mahomes. They've added some bodies on defense. They've got like a true shutdown corner. They've got a stud left tackle. They've got a promising edge rusher, Will Anderson. So probably the Texans, in my opinion. Maybe if Trevor Lawrence gets on the level that I think he can be on, the Jaguars, but they're still missing a couple of pieces. So, yeah, I mean, it's true. You think about the Bills, they're really taking a step back. I'm not going to write off Josh Allen, but yeah, the Ravens lost a ton of guys. So, I mean, those are probably their two biggest foes. Those teams have taken a step back for sure, and definitely not, it feels like the Chargers are in transition. The Broncos are in transition. The Raiders are the Raiders. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's really wide open for Kansas City. There's no doubt about it.
Honestly, I think I agree. I think a dark horse could be the Browns, believe it or not. There could be a dark horse pick, but that's all dependent on Watson staying healthy. That's dependent on Nick Chubb being able to return back to form because he did tear his ACL.
Right. Yeah, I know. I mean, who knows if Chubb will ever be the same, but I mean,
yeah,
he's definitely one of my favorite Browns of all time. So,
yep. And I think the Texans may, if not the Chiefs, I say the Texans probably because they have a good, talented core and they're all young too. So they've got time.
There's no doubt about it.
Yep. And the Steelers will probably go 9-8 somehow. They could take 11 of us and 11 of me, 11 of us all together, and just somehow find a way to go 9-8. Just because. It's the Steeler way.
Yeah. It's true.
Yep.
It's true, man. There's no doubt about it.
Yep. And I want to also cover the NFC as well before, who is the favorite out of the NFC, in your opinion? Yeah.
Ooh. Let's see here. Favorite in the NFC. I mean, it's still got to be the 49ers, but how much longer is there super window like this going to be open? Good question. 49ers. Everybody in the NFC North is good. Cowboys kind of took a step back.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I'm going to still say the 49ers, man.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Believe it or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I think either the Lions could after, they got a taste of what it's like to have playoff football in Detroit after so long, just like Cleveland did. And Green Bay,
I think my only question with Detroit is how long, how just how big is or how high is his ceiling, for the Lions with him? Because Goff's contract's been relatively cheap. It's like they just paid Amon-Ra, they just paid Penei Sewell, they're about to pay Goff. I mean, they'll have a couple of guys cheap, but with all the guys they're paying, they'll have to pay Aiden Hutchinson eventually. So how does that look? You know what I mean? I mean, I like Jared Goff, but is Jared Goff top 10 quarterback? And how does it look when you're paying that guy? You know what I mean?
2018 Goff and 2023 Goff are pretty different. This was 18 Goff, I'd probably say
yeah.
Yeah, dark horse, I say it's Green Bay. Because they're kind of like Houston, young team, and they kind of also beat my Saints in week 4 to get that last wildcard spot. That's not a game I feel comfortable talking about as a Saints fan.
No, I know. It's true. I was talking to someone about that today, and they were like, man, I gave up watching football after that. And I was like, really?
Yeah.
But it makes sense.
Yeah, I gave it up and then said, see you next Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough. I mean, if I was a Saints fan, I would have been mad too.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Hey, we're a lot further along than most teams are, and that's all I can say. I just hope we can contend in the South. That's all I can say. And Lindy, thank you for coming on Tapped In with Tony. Where can people find you?
I appreciate it, man. Good to see you. Let's keep in touch, and
absolutely.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon. Sound good?
Yeah, and where can people find your stuff at? As far as
Yeah, so it's LuckIsMadeFF. I got a link to basically my whole portfolio, writing, video, everything. So probably Twitter is the best spot to find me. But other than that,
Yeah.
You can check out my YouTube, same handle. I'm really got a lot more video content coming up. So
Okay. Thanks for thanks for coming on the show, and thank you guys all for tuning in to Tapped In with Tony. We'll see you guys next time.